Takashi is a lazy slacker who secretly has a crush on the school's beauty, Rei, but has no chance with her because she's in love with his best friend. However, everything changes when a zombie apocalypse wipes out half the school, including his best friend, leaving Rei heartbroken. Now, Takashi has to man up and protect his crush by fighting off hordes of zombies, while Rei slowly falls in love with him. Today, we're breaking down High School of the Dead. Lock in and enjoy this action romance. On the day the world became attack on zombies, Takashi ditched class to mope over Rei, his childhood crush, who was already taken by his best friend, Hisashi. While this simping fool was drowning in his feelings, he suddenly caught a commotion at the school gate. Some teachers were trying to chase off a random dude banging on it, and when a teacher tried to flex in front of his crush, the dude chomped his hand like it was a snack. Everyone watched in horror as the bitten teacher dropped to the ground and died. While his work crush was losing it, Bro suddenly rose from the dead and gave her the kiss of death. The horrific scene rattled Takashi to his core, so he bolted back to class and yanked Rei out of her seat, telling her they had to bounce. Confused, Hisashi asked why Takashi was trying to steal his girl. Takashi broke it down that the apocalypse was popping off outside, and if they didn't move, they'd get swallowed up in it. The next second, Rei snatched her hand back and started whining like a spoiled brat until Takashi quiets her with a resounding slap. Hisashi just watched the whole thing play out, and moments later, the three of them dipped from the classroom. Takashi said they needed weapons, but Hisashi claimed his Gigachot energy alone meant he'd never have to break out his black belt karate moves. Rei tried to ring her dad, a cop, but was shocked to find every emergency line completely jammed. Before she could even process that, a teacher's voice crackled over the PA system, telling students to evacuate because violence had erupted. Then he suddenly went quiet, and when his voice came back, he was screaming for his life. The next second, all hell broke loose as panicked students turned the hallways into Black Friday on steroids. Clocking what was happening, Hisashi suggested they cut through the admin office, but once outside, they ran straight into an infected teacher. He crept toward Rei like he was on a mission, but the baddie had pent-up rage and unleashed a whole combo on him until she finally put a blade through his heart. He kept coming anyway, so she started wondering when exactly she'd sign up for Evil Dead. As she fought him off, Hisashi launched himself at the guy from behind and ripped him away from Rei. Takashi quickly reminded him that pretty boys don't get plot armor in zombie flicks, but Hisashi said he'd be fine. Right then, the zombie pulled a full 360 head spin and sank its teeth into his arm. Takashi and Rei both moved to help, but the zombie's grip on Hisashi was so locked in that it wouldn't budge until Takashi caved its skull in like a watermelon. They looked around, and when they saw the whole campus swarming with zombies, Hisashi suggested heading to the rooftop to lay low until help showed. But when they got up there and saw the city completely ablaze, they knew help wasn't coming. Even the military helicopters that passed by didn't slow down, and Takashi pointed out that things outside were probably even worse. Right then, they realized zombies had closed in around them, so Takashi called for them to fight through to the observatory and barricade up there for now. After taking out another zombie, they managed to seal themselves in, and while they waited, Hisashi started coughing up blood. Rei immediately ran to his side and called for Takashi to help, but Takashi didn't budge, finally clocking that this girl might have swapped her brains for bigger airbags. Hisashi then said he wanted to go out on his own terms before turning undead, but his delusional girlfriend wouldn't let him, convinced she could will him back to normal. Even after he fully turned, she refused to move and had to be physically dragged away by Takashi, who had no choice but to cave Hisashi's head in. As his body dropped between them, the ungrateful Rei accused Takashi of ending her men out of pure jealousy. Instead of questioning whether her brain was working, Bro decided to take his odds with the zombies and started climbing over the barricade. Seeing that, Rei snapped back to reality fast, realizing she'd be done for without him. So, she grabbed him and begged him not to go. Feeling for the heartbroken girl, he climbed back down and pulled her into a tight hug as she completely fell apart. Back inside, Takagi, who also happened to be Takashi's childhood friend, teamed up with a nerdy guy named Hirano in the most unexpected duo ever. While fleeing for their lives, Hirano panicked about being zombie bait, but Takagi shut him down fast because dying wasn't on her schedule. Up on the rooftop, Takashi and Rei stayed quiet, but Takashi's mind kept looping back to the moment he ended his best friend's life. Snapping out of it, he said they needed intel on what was happening outside, so Rei grabbed his phone to ring her dad, a cop. When he picked up, she tried reaching out for help, but the terrible signal made it impossible for him to catch a word. Mid-sentence, as he urged them to get somewhere safe, a gunshot rang out, and the call dropped cold. For the second time that day, Rei was a wreck, grieving her father whose fate was now a big question mark. Back in the building, as Takagi scoped out the zombie-packed hallway they needed to cross, Hirano asked whether she had her phone so they could dial the cops. Takagi clowned on him, wondering if all that junk food had fried both his legs and his brain equally. She then broke it down for him. With everything falling apart, there was zero chance nobody had already dialed 911. And since the cops still hadn't rolled up, it was clear the school wasn't the only spot these undead freaks had taken over. Mid-lecture, a zombie popped up right behind them, forcing them both to bolt again. The whole time, Takagi was fuming that she was stuck with this cowardly lump instead of Takashi. Over in the nurse's office, while some dude was caving in his newly turned friend's skull before becoming a snack, Nurse Marikawa was casually packing up medical supplies like it was any other Tuesday. Then the zombie mob outside smashed through the door and devoured the guy who just played hero before he could even shoot his shot with Big Titty Nurse. Right as they locked in on Marikawa for round 2, a girl named Seiko showed up and wiped the floor with every single one of them using her kendo practice sword. She thanked the boy for being an accidental human shield for Marikawa, then put him down with his blessing. Before anyone could breathe, another zombie wave crashed in, and Seiko pivoted to handle them too. Meanwhile, Takagi and Hirano had made it to the school workshop, where Takagi dumped every tool she could grab and ordered Hirano to build something deadly. As he started throwing the pieces together, zombies began hammering on the door, and Takagi screamed at him to move faster unless he wanted them both to die as nobodies. When the door finally gave, and the zombies lunged at Takagi, Hirano opened fire on their skulls with his cobbled-together nail gun. He told Takagi to hand him the extra nails and the drill, but Her Highness complained she wasn't his personal errand girl. Hirano hit her with a glare that could kill, then softened it into a smile and tacked on a please. Once the last zombie dropped, they stepped into the hallway and kicked off their lives as apocalypse survivors. Back on the roof, zombies punched through the barricade, so Takashi and Rei hosed them back to carve out an escape route. Even then, they still had to scrap their way through a handful more just to get back inside. Safe in the stairwell, Takashi told Rei they'd find a way off campus and head home, picking up any survivors they crossed. Rei suggested he phone ahead, but he shut it down, explaining that his dad lived far away and his mom was at work, so nobody would pick up anyway. He played it off as not wanting to make them panic, but really, he was terrified they might already be among the undead. Across the building, Takagi tested her zombie theory by lobbing a wet rag at a locker while Hirano watched. As they observed a zombie going to town on the locker, she concluded they were fully blind, which meant quiet movement was their golden ticket past them. When she signaled it was time to move, Hirano hesitated and grumbled about trekking all the way into the city. She fired back that burning a few calories was the absolute last thing she was stressing over right now. But she'd said it too loud, and every zombie in the hallway zeroed in on them. Across the building, Seiko and Marikawa were navigating another corridor, with Marikawa pushing hard for them to reach the faculty room. She explained that every set of car keys was stashed in there, making it a non-negotiable destination. Seiko said nothing, just swept the zombies in their path aside without going full skull-smashing mode. Marikawa got curious and asked why she was holding back, and Seiko said she preferred not to throw hands when it wasn't necessary. Impressed by the logic, Marikawa tried stepping forward, but ate the carpet near the doorway hard. Seiko took one look and told her those clothes were a liability, then sliced her skirt open at the side without asking. Marikawa was not happy about the unsolicited fashion edit and started whining, so Seiko told her to stop playing the ditzy damsel role. Right on cue, a loud crash exploded from the faculty room, and Seiko instantly clocked where it was coming from. She was right on the money. Hirano was in there unloading nails into every zombie trying to make him their dinner, alongside Takagi. Takagi herself was completely useless in the fight, loudly complaining that she couldn't study dead zombies. Brushing past her tantrum, Hirano told her to get in the fight. She refused, and he calmly pointed out there was a zombie directly behind her. Takagi caught one look at that zombie and screamed at a frequency that would humble any man alive, snapping Rei, Takashi, Seiko, and Marikawa to attention from wherever they were. Hirano went to blast it, but came up dry. Not a single nail left in the gun, and absolutely nothing he could do. Takagi stumbled backwards over his bag trying to create distance, but when the zombie closed in, she snatched the drill sitting right beside her and bored a clean hole straight through its skull. Takashi and the crew arrived seconds later and started wiping out the leftover zombies on the spot. With the last zombie down, Rei and Marikawa rushed over to check on a visibly shaken Takagi, while Takashi locked down the room. Since they were all stranded in the same nightmare, Saeko stepped up and introduced herself, and the rest followed, which somehow rubbed Takagi the wrong way. When Takagi snapped at everyone for acting like this was a casual meet and greet, Seiko rested a hand on her shoulder to bring her back down. She'd already figured out that Takagi's meltdown was just the adrenaline crash from almost becoming zombie chow. Within seconds, Takagi completely fell apart in tears, and Seiko held her steady until she had nothing left to cry out. Later, they relocated to the faculty room, where Takagi scrubbed the blood off her face while Marikawa tore through drawers hunting for car keys. Saeko cut in and noted her car was way too compact for their whole crew, pitching the school bus as the obvious move instead. While everyone started debating their next destination after ditching the school, Takagi noticed that Rei had zoned in completely on the TV screen. The moment everyone else caught on, they all swung around to look, and what was playing on that news broadcast left them all floored. According to the reporter, nobody had pinpointed where the outbreak started, and infection numbers were climbing every single second. She was mid-sentence covering the government's official response when the cops started unloading bullets into backed-up zombies on screen. While everyone watched in horror, a zombie lunged at the reporter, the feed got axed, and a studio anchor took over immediately. The replacement broadcast told all uninfected civilians to stay locked indoors until further notice, and that advice straight up infuriated Takashi. He couldn't wrap his head around why the government was being so tight-lipped, and Takagi explained it was all about keeping mass hysteria at bay. Redirecting their eyes to the screen, they discovered the outbreak had gone global and that every world government was completely clueless about the next move. The realization that the entire planet had transformed into a horror film set within mere hours hit Rei like a truck, and she gravitated straight toward Takashi for comfort. She also tried convincing herself that normalcy would bounce back eventually, but Takagi told her to get a grip on reality. She then drew a comparison to the 1918 Spanish flu, an epidemic that claimed roughly 50 million lives worldwide. Marikawa pushed back though, arguing it tracked more closely with the 14th century Black Death, which erased over a third of Europe's entire population. Curious, Takashi asked how either of those catastrophes actually wrapped up, and Marikawa explained the theory that transmission died out simply because there weren't enough hosts left to keep it going. That sent Hirano into a spiral, pointing out they were absolutely cooked. Unlike those diseases where victims stayed bedridden, these zombies were up and mobile everywhere. Marikawa tried to reassure him that nature would handle it and the undead would eventually decompose, but Takagi told her not to apply normal medical reasoning to this mess. From where she stood, the zombies might never rot at all, considering they were already dead and still walking around just fine. Seiko cut in and reminded everyone that escaping the school and checking on their families had to come before anything else. They locked in on working as a unit, grabbed all their gear, and Takagi directed them toward the front entrance since it sat closest to the parking lot. On the way there, they cut down every zombie blocking their path, but once they hit the staircase, Saeko warned them against picking unnecessary fights. Takagi also started breaking down her zombie observations, but a sudden shriek sliced right through her explanation. It was coming from another pocket of survivors, so the group swooped in, Avengers style, and pulled them out. Afterward, everyone pushed toward the front doors, but the sheer density of undead crowding the entrance made them freeze up. Eventually, Takashi stepped up to personally test Takagi's sound reaction theory on the zombies. Rei was completely against it and moved to pull him back, but Seiko intercepted her and said to let him make his own call. Takashi walked straight into the zombie crowd, faking confidence, and once he clocked that they were genuinely blind, his nerves settled. He then grabbed a nearby shoe and pitched it the opposite way to pull the zombies' attention clear of the entrance. But right as the group quietly crept toward the bus, one of the rescued boys accidentally clipped the railing with his weapon. That noise functioned like an open invitation for every zombie in the vicinity, and Takashi hollered at everyone to sprint. As they bolted, the armed members held the zombies off, while the unarmed ones pushed ahead without any obstacles. Then one of the boys got snatched, and his girlfriend flat out refused to abandon him and ran straight back into the chaos. Takagi, who had been grabbing at her, trying to stop it, couldn't help but question whether love genuinely made people this reckless every single time. Marikawa said she completely understood the girl, because in that same situation, she'd have done the identical thing, since a life without her person wouldn't be worth living. Takagi, ever the voice of cold logic, started fuming and launched into a counterargument, but a zombie going for her face shut her up mid-sentence. Hirano bailed her out, thankfully, but rather than showing any gratitude, she turned around and blamed him for cutting her off. Takashi soon bulldozed a clear lane to the bus and yelled for Marikawa to get the doors open. Everyone piled in the second she did, but right as they were pulling the doors shut, another cluster of survivors yelled at them to hold on. Among them was a teacher by the name of Shido, and out of nowhere, Rei quietly told Takashi to leave the man behind. She insisted letting him die would genuinely be the best outcome for everyone involved, and while they went back and forth over it, Shido was already shepherding his students onto the bus himself. Then one of them stumbled and rolled his ankle, and Shido responded by kicking the kid and declaring that the weak had zero business surviving in this new reality. He boarded last, the doors sealed, and Marikawa floored it, plowing through every zombie in the way until they cleared the school grounds entirely. As the bus rolled on, Shido thanked everyone and turned to Saiko, asking whether she was running the group. Saiko clarified that nobody held that title because every single one of them was chasing the exact same objective. Rei then leaned over to Takashi and warned him he'd come to regret the decision to let Shido board, but before he could dig into that, the city skyline appeared ahead. One of Shido's boys immediately started grumbling that he had zero interest in heading back into the city. When a second guy backed that sentiment up, Marikawa slammed the brakes and told the whole bus to pipe down because she was trying to drive. Seiko asked the vocal one where exactly he wanted to go, and his answer was essentially anywhere that didn't include Takashi. Baffled by the random hostility, Takashi got up and confronted him directly, but rather than explain himself, the guy just swung at him. Rei jumped between them and handled the guy swiftly, and Shido applauded her for it, though clearly he had his own angle cooking. He declared the group needed someone in charge, and conveniently volunteered himself since leadership apparently suited his taste. The students he'd brought along rubber-stamped him immediately, and that was enough to make Rei so disgusted she stepped off the bus entirely. Takashi asked her to come back. She said Shido's presence made that impossible, and the two-faced teacher smoothly told her the exit was all hers. Takashi immediately told him to stay in his lane and ran after Rei, but mid-conversation, a bus packed with zombies came barreling straight at them. He yanked Rei clear just in time, but the rogue bus boxed them inside the tunnel and erupted into flames. Seiko's voice came through from the far side, asking if they'd made it out okay, and Takashi called back, confirming they were both alive. He also gave her the green light to keep moving without them, promising they'd link up at the Eastern Police Station by the following day. The moment Marikawa pulled away, the burning bus detonated, forcing Takashi and Rei to Mission Impossible their escape through the tunnel without getting cooked. Before they could even decompress, a helmeted zombie jumped Takashi from nowhere, but Rei caved its skull in with a chunk of concrete. She hauled him back to his feet, and side by side, they tracked down the zombie's abandoned bike and rode it straight into the city. After riding around for a bit, Takashi pulled the bike over, and as they gazed out across the city, Rei asked whether he thought rescue was even possible. Takashi said no, breaking it down that, with the world in this state, nobody was going to put their life on the line for strangers. It was the truth. But Rei got heated and snapped that he always managed to say exactly the wrong thing at the worst possible moment. Right on cue, zombie sounds started closing in, so Takashi fired up the bike and peeled out before things got ugly. Meanwhile, the bus hauling the rest of the group was crawling through gridlock because the cops had thrown up a checkpoint and were screening every vehicle for infected passengers. Since the line was barely inching forward, Takagi calculated they wouldn't hit the bridge until sunrise at the earliest. Suddenly, gunfire cracked through the air as officers dropped some zombies that had gotten too close. The shots spooked two girls sitting in the bus, so Shido, their self-appointed messiah, swooped over to settle them down. He promised they were completely safe and that nothing was going to touch them, and the girls ate it up entirely. Around that same time, Takashi and Rei were cutting through a stretch of the city that was eerily empty. Just as they started puzzling over the missing zombie population, Rei locked onto a parked police cruiser and immediately perked up. Sadly, pulling up closer revealed that both officers were already dead, courtesy of a collision with a truck. Takashi was ready to bounce, but Rei dug her heels in and insisted on raiding the vehicle for anything worth taking. She turned up a firearm, a baton, and a pair of handcuffs, so Takashi claimed the gun along with the spare ammunition. They hopped back on the bike and rolled to a gas station to fill the tank, only to find out it was self-service with no attendant, and Takashi was completely broke. When he broke that news to Rei, she went off about what a useless disaster he was, which got under his skin. He fired back with a dig about not being flawless like Hisashi, and Rei bristled hard at him, dragging her dead boyfriend into it. They went back and forth for a bit, until Takashi hit his limit and just asked her straight up for gas money. Predictably, she was equally broke since all their stuff was still sitting at school, so he told her to hang tight while he went to lift some cash from inside. Rei stayed put, but out of nowhere, some creep yanked her from behind with a blade pressed right to her throat, and she screamed. Takashi instantly scrapped his robbery plan and sprinted back outside to deal with it. He ordered the guy to release Rei, but the guy wasn't budging, claiming he needed a woman by his side to make it through the apocalypse. Stunned by that unhinged logic, Takashi asked if he'd lost his mind, and the guy basically confirmed it. He'd personally put down his whole family after they turned. Right then, Rei made a move to break free, but the guy snatched her right back and started getting rough with her. He made some gross comments about Rei's body and threw it in Takashi's face, asking if he was enjoying the perks every night. When Takashi stayed silent, the guy kept mocking him and putting his hands on Rei more, and she screamed for Takashi to do something. He started moving toward them, but the guy threatened to slice her open unless he dropped the bat and pumped the gas. Takashi deliberately hurled the bat, so it smacked the ground loud, pulling every nearby zombie straight to the noise. He went ahead and filled the tank, and once he was done, the thug told him to get lost, but Takashi held his ground and tried talking the guy into letting Rei walk. When words got him nowhere, he drew the gun he'd picked up and closed the gap fast, not firing it, but jamming the barrel directly into the guy's chest. That did it. The guy's confidence crumbled, and he asked whether Takashi was really ready to risk blowing everything up with a shot. Takashi told him flat out that for Rei, absolutely yes, and then he pulled the trigger. The hit made a guy crumple and release Rei, and as he was on his knees cursing up a storm, Rei walked over, weapon in hand. She was ready to make him pay for everything he'd put her through, but Takashi told her not to burn energy on someone already done for. He also flagged the zombie horde closing in on them, so she swung onto the bike behind him. As they rode away, the guy screamed for them not to leave him, but nobody was listening, and the undead swarmed him completely. Hours ticked by. The sun eventually came up, and as they kept riding, Takashi cautioned Rei that more people like that guy were going to cross their path. Rei gave a quiet nod and rested her head on his back, not knowing he was quietly wrestling with guilt over indirectly getting someone killed, even someone who earned it. Then a plane cut across the sky overhead, and Rei started waving at it purely on impulse. Meanwhile, over at the airport, a plane was gearing up for departure, but the runway had been completely taken over by zombies. To handle the problem, a sniper team was sent out to clear them, and once the job was wrapped up, one of them radioed back to the control tower. His partner Rika then got to her feet and started removing her bulletproof vest while grumbling that her milk balls were being suffocated by it. The guy volunteered to help work out the tension, but she shot him down and said he wasn't her type. Brushing off the rejection, Dude pivoted to wondering how the zombies had even made it into the offshore airport. Rika figured that one of the many high-ranking officials and their families who'd been granted access was probably already infected. As the plane lifted off, Rika told her partner she was heading back into the city to check on a friend she was worried about. That friend was Marikawa, who was still gridlocked in traffic alongside Takagi and the rest of the crew. While Shido was busy running his mouth to his devoted followers to kill time, a thoroughly bored Takagi, done with his nonsense, shook Hirano awake and asked how he could possibly sleep through all this. Hirano said there was nothing productive he could do anyway, and threw in that they probably should have taken a different road. Takagi said that wouldn't have changed anything, and mid-explanation, they spotted a plane cutting through the sky. She immediately figured it was bound for some heavily fortified location, so Hirano floated the idea of tracking down somewhere like that for themselves. She shut it down fast, explaining that secured facilities like that weren't letting anyone new in, terrified of someone bringing the infection inside. In fact, the sheer desperation to survive would strip people of their humanity, making them willing to throw anyone under the bus. Shido was a living example of that, currently feeding the other students a steady diet of manipulation and half-truths. Takagi knew he couldn't be trusted, and when she let slip that she wished Takashi was still with them, Hirano immediately asked if she was catching feelings for the guy. She rushed to deny it, but completely froze the moment she clocked that Marikawa and Seiko were standing right behind her. Luckily, neither of them made it weird, and Seiko simply said she was concerned about how Takashi and Rei were holding up. Speaking of those two, they rode up on a group of unhinged people who were hunting zombies purely for entertainment. Not trying to get tangled up in that, Takashi hit the gas and started weaving the bike through when the group turned their sights on them. Once they were clear, Rei asked what their deal was, and Takashi said the world had simply broken their brains. He kept riding after that, but instead of steering toward the bridge, he swung in the complete opposite direction. Rei was confused and called him out on it, so he stopped and told her to take a good look at how packed that bridge was before making it clear they needed a different way across. Back on the bus, Shido's endless sermons had pushed Takagi and the others completely past their limit, so they huddled up and started talking about their families instead. Eventually, the conversation landed on whether they actually wanted to keep rolling with Shido and his freshly indoctrinated crew, and the answer was a unanimous hard no. Shido clearly picked up on what was being discussed, so he called them out and tried to sell them on the idea that sticking together was their only real shot, but Takagi told him they weren't buying it. He then told them they were all free to walk, except Marikawa, since his group would need someone with medical knowledge if things went sideways. As he started closing the distance between them, Hirano fired a shot that just barely grazed his cheek. Shido was completely blindsided and tried hitting Hirano with the whole "this isn't the real you" angle, but Hirano told the worthless snake to save it. Turns out, Shido had spent years quietly pulling strings to make certain students bully Hirano relentlessly, and Hirano had just had to eat it because he had no power to fight back. But now that civilization had completely collapsed, he could absolutely send this manipulative piece of work straight to the afterlife, and nobody would lose a single minute of sleep over it. Watching how dead serious Hirano was, Shido stumbled back in genuine fear and could do nothing but clench his jaw in fury as Marikawa walked out with Hirano's crew. Meanwhile, Takashi and Rei pulled up to another bridge, and spotting that one was blocked too, Takashi started running through alternate routes in his head. Right then, they caught what sounded like gunfire in the distance, but Takashi quickly clocked that it was actually Hirano's nail gun going off. Their crew was currently getting swarmed by a zombie horde, so Takashi rode straight over to back them up. After dropping Rei off with Seiko, he pushed to where Hirano was holding down the line and tossed his gun over to him. Hirano snatched it clean out of the air and started putting two in every zombie in his path. Takashi then used the bike itself to sweep the remaining zombies off the bridge, securing the group's win. Relieved that everyone had made it, Rei sprinted over and threw herself at Marikawa for a hug, only to immediately get a face full of chest. Seiko pulled Takashi into a conversation, which had both Rei and Takagi fuming that he was giving everyone else attention but her. Meanwhile, Hirano was so deep in his excitement over the gun Takashi had handed him that he completely forgot to acknowledge his friends were back. A short while later, as they all gathered by the riverbank, trying to figure out their next play, Marikawa floated the idea of crashing at a friend's place nearby for the night. Takagi asked whether this friend happened to be a boyfriend, and Marikawa was quick to clarify that her friend was a woman. She explained that the girl traveled constantly for work, so she'd handed Marikawa a spare key with an open invitation to use the place whenever. She also mentioned her friend had a truck they could borrow to move around the next day, so everyone was on board. When they pulled up to the spot, Hirano's jaw nearly hit the floor when he saw that the truck in question was a full military-grade Humvee. That sent Takagi straight into asking what exactly Marikawa's friend did for a living, but Marikawa just stayed quiet. Right on cue, a cluster of zombies started moving toward them, so the group rushed in and carved out a clear path straight to the apartment building. Once they were all safely inside, Marikawa and the girls headed off to shower, and Rei could not stop staring at Marikawa's disco balls like it owed her money. She then brazenly reached out to touch them, sending Marikawa scrambling to escape. Their shrieking got on Takagi's nerves, but just as she started going off about it, Seiko sprayed her with water to shut her up, and Takagi retaliated by pouring cold water down her back. While all that chaos was unfolding in the bathroom, Takashi and Hirano were out there, shoulder deep in cracking open a locker they'd stumbled across. When they finally popped it open, Takashi stood there stunned at the top-tier rifles sitting neatly inside, while Hirano looked like he'd just seen heaven. Dude rattled off every rifle by name and stat from memory, and while he was busy losing his mind over them, a baffled Takashi dug deeper into the locker and pulled out a shotgun. Hirano immediately launched into another episode, breaking down for Takashi exactly where it was manufactured and just how much damage it could do. But the second Takashi swung it in his direction, Hirano freaked out and told him to never aim a weapon at a living person under any circumstances. Takashi knew he had a point, but given the direction everything was heading, they both quietly accepted that pointing guns at people might eventually become unavoidable. They settled down after that and got to loading the weapons, and Takashi asked Hirano whether he'd picked up magazine loading from messing around with airsoft guns. Hirano grinned and dropped the bomb that he had real firearm experience, which caught Takashi completely off guard since he'd pegged Hirano as just another keyboard warrior gun nerd. Hirano revealed that during a trip to America, he'd spent a full month training under a retired Delta Force captain. A floored Takashi could only silently thank the universe for dropping someone like Hirano into his crew. He then scanned all the hardware laid out in front of them and started wondering what kind of person Marikawa's friend actually was, given that every single one of those guns was completely illegal to own. Hirano mentioned that Marikawa had mentioned at some point that her friend was part of the special assault team. Still, he figured the woman either came from serious generational wealth or had some very questionable income streams to be sitting on a place like this. Back in the bathroom, the girls were absolutely living their best lives, and their non-stop screaming prompted Hirano to grumble about the noise levels. Takashi, who had stepped out onto the balcony and was scanning the bridge through a pair of binoculars, told him to relax because the racket from the bridge was drowning them out completely. The standstill was making the crowd at the blockade increasingly on edge, and the officers were struggling harder by the minute to keep any semblance of order. The captain tried radioing for reinforcements, only to find out that every line back to headquarters had gone completely dark. The final directive all units had received before the blackout was that they were cleared to use whatever measures necessary to hold the situation together. When he relayed that to his second-in-command, the guy coldly suggested that sacrificing a few people for the bigger picture was their only move, and the captain felt that hit somewhere deep. From his spot on the balcony, Takashi watched zombies tearing into the people trapped at the back of the gridlock. He handed the binoculars to Hirano so he could see what was unfolding, then stepped back inside. When Hirano spotted a protest breaking out with news cameras already on the scene, he told Takashi to flip on the TV, and Takashi obliged. The broadcast reported that the protesters were pinning the outbreak directly on the government, accusing them of engineering it as a bioweapon alongside the Americans. Takashi thought the whole thing was just people grasping wildly, because science had no answers either, and Hirano cracked that their ringleader had clearly been speedrunning too many conspiracy games. Right then, officers on the bridge opened fire to push the zombies back, but pulled up short when they spotted a frantic mother begging for someone to help her already infected daughter. When the daughter turned and bit the mother, one of the cops put her down, but the crowd watching completely misread what had just happened. Their ringleader jumped on it immediately, declaring the police were gunning down innocent people and rallying everyone around him to fight back against the injustice. The captain walked over and calmly told the group to disperse, since they were actively making everything worse. But the leader accused him of doing the government's dirty work by trying to muzzle them. As he ramped his crowd back up, the captain drew his weapon and shot the man dead on the spot, leaving everyone around them completely speechless. Moments later, the live broadcast cut out, and a tense Takashi suggested they round up the girls and get moving. Hirano pushed back and said bailing now was a bad call, since visibility in the dark was practically zero. Right on cue, a tipsy Marikawa latched herself onto Takashi from behind and started fumbling around trying to check whether his God-given gun was loaded, but he intercepted her, so she pivoted and planted a kiss on his cheek instead. Caught off guard, he tried to peel her off, but accidentally grabbed her wagamamas in the process, which she responded to with very enthusiastic sounds. Takashi yanked his hands back and apologized immediately, but Marikawa waved it off and then redirected her energy straight at Hirano. The second her lips touched his cheek, every drop of blood in Hirano's body went to his face and then out through his nose, and he hit the floor almost instantly. Marikawa looked genuinely pleased with herself, and when Takashi tried to talk some sense into her, she went limp and passed out right in his arms. Somehow, Hirano had already regained consciousness and slipped out to the balcony to get his composure back, so Takashi asked him to keep watch before carrying Marikawa downstairs. On the way down, he ran straight into Rei, who was clearly also drunk off her rocker the moment she opened her mouth, and nothing sensible came out. Eventually, the rambling looped back around to her dad, and within seconds, she was in full tears. A little while later, after Takashi finally got Marikawa tucked in, he wandered into the kitchen looking for something to eat and walked in on Saiko cooking. The girl was dressed in nothing but an apron, leaving absolutely everything up to imagination, and Takashi yelped, stumbling backward. Catching on to why he'd reacted like that, she calmly explained she'd thrown all of their clothes into the washing machine and had nothing else to wear. While he was doing everything in his power not to stare, Rei called out to him from the staircase, so he went over to her. But the moment she started bringing up Hisashi and stacking him up against Takashi, Takashi's patience ran completely dry. He snapped at her to stop dragging a dead guy into everything and told her flat out he was never going to be Hisashi. Mid-argument, he let slip that he'd been carrying guilt over being the one to end Hisashi's life, and every time she brought him up, it ripped that back open. Then, out of nowhere, Rei leaned in and went for a kiss, and Takashi just let it happen. Over on the bridge, police officers ordered a bulldozer driver to shove everything and everyone behind the barricade back into the chaos. As the crowd scattered and ran, the captain buckled under the weight of it all and put a bullet in his own head. Back at the apartment, Takashi snapped back to reality and tried to pump the brakes on Rei, but she just laughed it off like it was nothing. Then a dog started going absolutely ballistic outside, and Takashi bolted upstairs to figure out what had set it off. Hirano immediately threw up a hand telling him to keep quiet, and that's when Takashi looked down and saw the streets were wall-to-wall zombies that the bulldozer had shoved their way. They watched the crowd get overwhelmed trying to hold the zombies off, and Takashi concluded the situation had spiraled completely out of control. Seiko joined them shortly after, and when they clocked a young guy seconds away from getting devoured, Takashi moved to intervene. Hirano immediately barked at him to stand down, and Saiko pointed out that firing a gun would broadcast their exact position to everyone. She went around cutting all the lights off, explaining that leaving them on would pull the living straight to their door, and they simply weren't equipped to take anyone else in. When Takashi stayed silent, she passed the binoculars back to him and told him to start making peace with being the villain, because the world wasn't what it used to be. Before heading back downstairs, he told her he'd expected better from her, and Saiko replied that not everybody could pull off being Luffy. Takashi stepped back outside and pressed the binoculars to his eyes to take in what was unfolding below. Every time he watched someone get torn apart, it gutted him, but he knew his hands were tied. Then he spotted a father and his daughter desperately trying to get into a house with his lights blazing. The people inside refused to budge, so the father begged them to at least take his daughter, and when they still wouldn't move, he threatened to kick the door in. That actually got them to crack it open, but rather than letting anyone through, they drove a blade into the father's stomach. As the door slammed shut, the man staggered back into the yard and crumpled to the ground, and his daughter sprinted straight to his side. Even as death crept in, the man told his daughter he was okay, and swore to her that everything was going to be fine. He used the last air in his lungs to tell her to go hide, but the girl broke down sobbing and begged him not to leave. Her devastating cries pulled every zombie in earshot toward her, and when Takashi saw what was coming, he forced himself to look away. But then Hirano started picking the zombies off with his rifle one by one, buying the girl enough time to find cover. The dog that had been losing its mind barking this whole time also bolted toward her and planted itself between her and the danger. Takashi turned to Hirano and asked why he'd thrown his own no-shooting rule straight out the window, and Hirano said only a completely soulless person could stand by and watch a little girl get eaten alive. He told Takashi to go get her and promised to hold things down from the balcony, so Takashi took off immediately. When he got downstairs and filled Rei in on where he was headed, she demanded to come along, but he shut it down and said he wasn't looking for a co-pilot. Rei pushed back, but Seiko told her to let it go and assured Takashi the house would be secure by the time he made it back. With no way left to change his mind, Rei shoved the revolver into his hands for backup. With that settled, he jumped on the bike and tore out of the compound the instant the girls swung the gates open, instantly pulling every zombie in the vicinity toward him. Takagi had also stumbled outside by then, rubbing her eyes trying to figure out what all the noise was about, and Rei told her they just remembered what it meant to be human. True to his word, Hirano kept laying down cover from the balcony, but when Takashi finally reached the girl, he fumbled the landing a bit. He shook it off fast and pushed through to where the girl was huddled in the corner, crying out for her parents. He caved zombie skulls in one after another with a crowbar, and when one tried to creep up from behind, he shoved the barrel of his gun into its mouth and blew it away. Back at the house, Takagi shook Marikawa awake and told Hirano to start getting ready to roll out, since staying put after stirring up that much noise wasn't an option anymore. Hirano barely registered a word of it, because he was in the middle of a full system crash after catching Marikawa completely in the nude. After grabbing everything they needed, Takagi and Marikawa headed outside, and that's when Takagi finally processed that the woman had absolutely nothing on. She immediately ordered her to cover up, and while she handled that, she huddled with Rei and Seiko to figure out their next move. Seiko noted that with every zombie laser focused on Takashi, loading up the vehicle would be easy. The catch was that they'd have to drive to his position, since there was no realistic way he could ride the bike back to them. While that conversation was happening, Takashi helped the little girl say goodbye to her father and let her cry for as long as she needed to. Back at the house, the girls finished loading everything into the Humvee and radioed Hirano to come down. As he was throwing his stuff together, Hirano glanced down and watched with genuine respect as Takashi used the fence to navigate his escape route. The little girl was clinging to his back, the dog was tucked away inside his shirt, and Takashi was quietly praying that the universe wasn't about to let him die here. Mid-escape, the girl suddenly announced she needed to pee, and in that moment, Takashi was fully convinced the cosmos had a personal beef against him. He told her to hold it until they reached somewhere safe, but she said that ship had already sailed, so he had no choice but to tell her to just go for it. The second she did, he tried pushing forward again, but a zombie latched onto his foot and nearly dragged them both down. Takashi wrenched himself free, kicked it off, and started scanning his surroundings for another way through. Right on cue, the Humvee came barreling toward them, with Seiko and Hirano riding on top like they were born for this. When they pulled up alongside Takashi, Seiko leapt off and started caving skulls in, while Sogeking Hirano opened fire the moment Takagi gave the command. Takashi thought they were absolutely unhinged, but he was also genuinely relieved to see them and hauled himself toward the truck. The second he was safely on board, Marikawa floored it and didn't ease up on the gas, even as daylight started breaking across the sky. Meanwhile, aboard Air Force One, the First Lady and several other top government officials who had already turned were getting unloaded on by the Secret Service. In a separate room, the Vice President was pressuring the President to punch in the nuclear codes and greenlight a missile launch. His logic was that striking before anyone else did would shield their nation from opportunistic attacks by countries looking to exploit the chaos. Since both of them had already been bitten, he pushed the President to enter the code as one final act of duty to their country. Right then, he started vomiting blood, so he asked someone to end it for him before he turned. Back in Japan, Takashi's crew used the amphibious truck to cross the river without breaking a sweat. During the crossing, Takagi held watch. Hirano kept a little girl, whose name turned out to be Alice, entertained, while Takashi and the others caught some sleep. Just as they were closing in on the other bank, Marikawa hollered at the 3 sleeping logs to wake up, but only Rei actually stirred. She spent a quiet moment admiring Takashi, but the second she clocked how peacefully Saiko was napping with her head on his lap, jealousy kicked in and she pinched him hard. Takashi shot awake, demanding to know what he'd done wrong, then froze when he registered Saiko draped across his lap. His startled yelp made her lift her head, and while she blinked around in confusion, Ray informed her she'd been drooling, which sent her straight into embarrassment mode. They eventually all piled out of the Humvee, and while the girls fussed over Alice, Takashi and Hirano pulled each other aside for a talk. Hirano told Takashi that Alice had mentioned her mother was supposed to link up with her and her dad, but she never came. The two boys figured she'd been turned, and silently agreed they'd be looking out for Alice going forward. Right then, Marikawa announced she'd grabbed clothes from Rika's place and told the girls to help themselves to whatever they wanted. As the selection process kicked off, Hirano tried nudging Takashi into sneaking a peek, but Takashi told the degenerate to get a grip. Even Zeke started barking like he'd understood exactly what Hirano suggested, so Takashi scooped him up and told him to pipe down. Still holding Zeke, a name Hirano had personally assigned the dog, Hirano passed him the shotgun they'd pulled from the locker. Takashi wasn't trying to take it, since he had zero idea how to operate it, but Hirano pushed it on him anyway and walked him through the basics. Takashi got lost almost immediately, since learning on the fly wasn't exactly his specialty, so Hirano just told him to hang on to it and swing it like a bat if needed. Right about then, the girls finished getting changed, and since they were absolutely serving post-apocalyptic fashion, the boys gave themselves a generous moment to take it all in. When asked whether they approved of what they were seeing, Takashi redirected and asked Ray if she actually knew how to handle a firearm. Ray admitted she had no clue, so Hirano pointed out that the rifle came fitted with a military bayonet she could wield like a spear instead. That's when Takagi called out to the boys and told them to head up to the road and check if it was safe. They did exactly that, and once they confirmed nothing sketchy was lurking, they waved Marikawa up to join them. With everyone regrouped, Takashi proposed they make Takagi's house their first stop, but told her up front not to walk in expecting the best. As they rode over, Ray, perched beside Takashi on the truck's roof, pointed out that they hadn't run into a single zombie since crossing over, and Takashi admitted that was throwing him off too. The ride stayed quiet and uneventful for a stretch, until Hirano spotted zombies blocking the road ahead and flagged it immediately. Marikawa whipped the wheel like Lewis Hamilton and cut down a different street, but that one was also packed with zombies, who got flattened one after another like bowling pins as the truck barreled through. Then Ray screamed at Marikawa to brake because a wire fence was coming up fast. Marikawa cranked the wheel and pinned the zombies against the barrier, and when she finally hit the brakes, Ray got launched clean off the roof onto the curb. Takashi, watching his girl about to become zombie dinner, hurled himself off the truck and fired at one of them. Predictably, his shot went wide, and the recoil knocked him back, so Hirano yelled at him to plant his feet and line up his aim properly. Takashi followed the instructions and started connecting with his shots, so he kept the rhythm going until the shells were completely spent. When he reached down to reload, he fumbled and scattered them everywhere, so Seiko and Hirano jumped in to assist. Even with the help, he still couldn't get the shells sorted, so as the zombies tightened the circle around him and Ray, he turned and pulled her close against him. That movement put the gun strapped to her body right in his line of sight, so he repositioned her to function as a rifle rest and asked Hirano to walk him through firing it. Hirano ran him through it quickly without pausing his own zombie assault, and somehow, Takashi actually locked it in. Every shot he squeezed off sent a ripple through Ray's chest from the recoil, but Takashi was locked in too hard to appreciate the view. At one point, Marikawa tried to get the truck fired up so she could pull them out, but the engine refused to cooperate. Watching that, Takagi decided she was done being useless and climbed out to back up her crew. She nearly got chomped immediately and had to be yanked out of trouble by Seiko before she could snag Takashi's shotgun and get it reloaded. For the next stretch, the whole squad, Zeke included, threw down against the zombies. But when the ammo dried up and the horde kept pressing in, it dawned on everyone that they were actually cooked. In a last-ditch effort, Takashi and Saiko tried pulling the zombies off in a different direction, but only a handful took the bait. While Takashi was working on drawing their attention, Hirano lifted Alice out of the truck and told her she needed to push ahead with Zeke for right now. He promised her they'd all be right behind her, but Alice wasn't buying a word of it. She told him her father had made the same kind of promise right before he died and said she'd rather go down with him than lose another set of people she loved. Her words hit Hirano somewhere deep, but he was dead set on getting her out alive. So he moved to toss her over the fence, and then out of nowhere, a squad decked out in firefighter gear rolled up and completely took over. After driving the zombies back using high-pressure air cannons, they helped Hirano and the girls get safely over to the other side of the fence. Once everyone was accounted for, Marikawa thanked their rescuers, and the leader told her it was the bare minimum she could offer her daughter and her crew. With that, she pulled off her helmet, and that's when Takagi realized she was looking at her own mother and bolted straight into her arms. Satisfied that their people were in good hands, Takashi told Marikawa he knew a back route to Takagi's house and started guiding her toward it. Watching them head off, Takagi called out that they'd be sitting tight and waiting for them to show up. Takashi and Saiko sprinted for a bit, then switched routes after running into some zombies. Takagi's place was visible in the distance, but way too far to reach on foot, so Takashi decided they needed wheels. They busted into a bike shop they'd passed earlier that day and, after poking around for a bit, spotted a buggy with amphibious features. Takashi was obsessed with it the second he laid eyes on it, and Seiko had zero objections to taking it. Once they bounced from the store, a horde chased them down a hill toward the riverbank. Sliding down the slope wasn't enough to shake the zombies, so Takashi floored the buggy straight into the water. When he spun around to check on Seiko, he nearly lost it, seeing that her shirt had gone completely see-through. But he didn't look away, because nothing in his life had ever hit like that view, and when Saiko caught him staring, she slapped her arms over her chest and went off on him. A few minutes into floating on the water, they watched the zombies wander off, and Takashi let out a long exhale. Seiko then leaned in close to whisper something, but Takashi yelped at her proximity, so she hissed at him to keep it down. After that, he steered the buggy toward a sandbank in the middle of the river, and Seiko suggested they crash there for a bit. Takashi volunteered to keep watch while she rested, but right then she sneezed, so he yanked out his vest and tossed it to her to swap into. Once she was done changing, she told him he could look, and Bro nearly short-circuited, seeing how hard that vest was doing her justice. Saiko clocked his reaction and called him out, saying she could tell he was trying to get it. Takashi went to deny it, but just fumbled over his own words like a clown, so he shut himself up. Out of nowhere, a beat later, he asked her if there was someone she had feelings for. Seiko said yes, but left it at that and suggested they head out. Takashi didn't push back on her sudden change of heart and steered the buggy back toward the city. The noise instantly pulled every zombie in range toward them, but Takashi pushed forward until he slammed into a fountain. Predictably, Saiko got soaked again, and when she groaned about it, he grinned and told her to dig the tape out of his bag. He rigged the buggy to keep looping around the fountain, reeling in every zombie nearby. Seiko started demolishing zombies to carve a path forward, but when she came face to face with two small ones, she locked up and couldn't swing. Takashi clocked it, bolted over, handled it himself, then grabbed her and hauled them both out of there. They ducked into a shrine, barred the doors, and Takashi asked Saiko what had killed her energy back there. Saiko dropped to the floor, and after she stayed silent for a stretch, he told her they were bunking at the shrine for the night. He lit a candle, poked around, and turned up an actual katana, which he brought over to Saiko along with her dry clothes, then stepped aside so she could change. When she was done, he came back, sat it across from her, and slid a sealed pouch her way. He murmured that it was their only portable toilet situation, and Seiko cracked up at how dead serious his face was. That broke the ice a little, but Seiko was still guarded when she asked Takashi if he still wanted to know why she'd frozen up. He figured it was about the small zombies, but she said that moment had just dredged up something buried in her past. She kicked off her story by explaining that she never told the guy she liked how she felt because she figured no one would want to kill her. Apparently, 4 years back, on her walk home, some creep tried to put his hands on her, so she beat him senseless with her practice sword. By the time the cops rolled up, he was in pieces, but they cleared her of any wrongdoing and drove her home themselves. Seiko admitted she had savored every single second of that beatdown, and said her true self was a depraved and twisted creature who probably belonged in a padded cell at Arkham. In her mind, someone built like her had no business chasing something as wholesome as love. But Takashi wasn't having it. He pushed back by pointing out that he'd pulled some messed up moves himself, since the dead started walking. Seiko told him to stop drawing that comparison because his actions had been survival instinct, while hers had always lived inside her. That scene at the fountain had thrown it back in her face, and she knew that in this new world, she had gotten even darker than she used to be. The second she said it, Takashi snatched her hand, cutting off whatever she was about to say. They locked eyes for a long moment before Takashi leaned in and kissed her. The next morning, as they pushed toward Takagi's house, zombies boxed them in from every direction. Takashi instantly told Seiko to bolt, but she just stood there looking soft and frozen like she didn't know herself anymore. Reading the situation, Takashi stepped behind her and grabbed her assets, because apparently that was exactly the kind of guy he was. He told her he was handing her a reason to move, since it looked like she'd completely lost her drive overnight. On top of that, he made it clear that her darkness didn't change a thing, because to him, she'd always be the most badass girl around, and he refused to watch her go out like that. To close out the pep talk, he told her to own her demons and carry her baggage like the menace she truly was. His words hit different, and Seiko thanked him before going full Tanjiro on the zombie crowd. Every swing of her blade had her grinning wider and wilder, proving she'd finally made peace with herself. Once the last zombie dropped, Takashi started guiding her to Takagi's place, but she called him to halt. She grabbed his hand and asked if he was ready to take responsibility for her, and Takashi smiled and told her absolutely. Not long after, they pulled up to Takagi's house looking way closer than when they left, and when Takagi spotted them from the window, her face fell flat. Only Alice, Zeke, and Hirano came sprinting out to meet them. Rei was absent because she was still healing, and after Takashi got dressed, he helped Marikawa pin her down so she could rub ointment on her body. When she was done, Rei called Takashi a backstabber and told him to get out of her room, which threw him off, so he asked why. Rei answered with a flustered mix of embarrassment that she'd wanted to apply ointment to her chest since it was sore from him using it as an armrest. The second those words came out, Takashi bolted from the room and flew down the stairs like something was hunting him. Standing downstairs, he spotted some workers struggling to haul a heavy crate and moved to help, but the men waved him off and told him to leave the heavy lifting to actual grown-ups. After they walked off, Seiko came up to him, and when he saw she was rocking a kimono, his brain completely stalled. But when he tried to compliment her, the vibe turned awkward fast, and just as they were laughing through it, Alice and Zeke came wandering over. The little girl wanted to know what was funny, so Takashi told her they were just talking about how good it felt to see her again. Right then, Takagi's furious voice rang out from somewhere down the hall, and when she showed up, Takashi asked her what had her so heated. Instead of actually answering, she roasted him, but let him know she was relieved he'd made it out okay. As she turned and walked away, her mother stepped into the hallway and asked Takashi if she could pull him aside for a quick chat about Takagi. Meanwhile, Takagi headed to the garage where Hirano had set up shop cleaning his weapons. She warned him to soak it in while he could, because eventually they'd have to roll out. Hirano couldn't wrap his head around abandoning a place this locked down, so she tried to break down how the household actually operated. At the same time, her mother was running Takashi through the same breakdown. She explained that once the outbreak hit, the defense minister sent forces to the power facilities to keep them online. But they couldn't manage it alone, so she planned to bring everyone willing to fight, plus their families, to the plant within 2 days. Back in the garage, Takagi's family mechanic told Hirano he had no business messing around with firearms. Hirano hadn't even clocked Takagi's presence until she spoke up, and she dismissed the mechanic after he confirmed he'd finished fixing their truck. Hirano was kind of impressed by how the man had treated her, but Takagi told him to drop the wide-eyed act. She pointed out that the mechanic had told him to quit playing with guns because he didn't see him as mature enough to handle them. She added that everyone in that house saw them the same way, so they needed to get with the rest of the crew and figure out their next move. Inside, Takashi was heading to his room, but mentally chewing on how to approach Takagi. Her mother had told him that Takagi was against relocating to the power plant and was hoping he could talk some sense into her. A bit later, the whole crew gathered in Rei's room at Takagi's request, and she laid it out, and they had to decide whether to stay with her family or not. Takashi said sticking around made more sense since her parents had the situation locked down. Takagi also acknowledged that what her parents had pulled off to keep people safe was genuinely impressive. But she couldn't get over the fact that they hadn't come looking for her, despite having every resource to do so. The way she saw it, they'd written her off as someone who couldn't survive and had never planned on saving her. That set Takashi off, and he grabbed her by the collar and told her to at least be grateful her parents were alive, unlike the rest of them, who had no clue whether their families had made it. Nobody said a word after he snapped, and after the silence stretched on, Takagi quietly asked him to put her down and told him she got his point. Takashi let her go, and as she tried to pick the meeting back up, the rumble of trucks rolling into the estate cut her off. They all rushed outside to see what was going on, and stood there floored as Takagi's father climbed out of one of the vehicles that had pulled in with the convoy. He'd brought back one of his men who had turned while saving others, and told everyone to get a good look at him. He explained that even though this man had laid everything down for them, he was now a danger, so as the head of the family, the responsibility of putting him down fell on him. The cage swung open and the zombie lunged, but he didn't flinch and took its head off in one clean stroke. As the head sank into the water, Takagi's father addressed the crowd and told them they all had to be ready to end a life, even when that life used to belong to someone they cared about. After dropping that gut punch of a speech, he walked off with his wife, and Takashi caught Hirano grumbling furiously under his breath. When he asked what was wrong, Hirano went off, saying swords were trash-tier weapons because they stopped being usable after only a few strikes. Seiko pushed back and told him that was wrong, explaining that a sword's effectiveness came down entirely to the person swinging it, but Hirano wasn't buying it. When he pushed back, Takashi tried to smooth things over, but Hirano turned his frustration on him and stormed off after Takagi told him to cool it. Takashi went after him right away, but Hirano had already disappeared, and just as he was about to put his fist through a wall, Alice appeared. She told him he needed to fix things with Hirano, but Takashi wasn't sure Hirano was in the mood to hear him out. Alice told him Hirano would come around if approached the right way, then took off to track him down. Left on his own, Takashi's mind drifted back to when their history teacher had told them about a crew that mutinied against their captain after getting too comfortable during a Long Island stay. He started questioning whether Takagi had a point about bouncing from the estate, but before he could land on an answer, Alice came sprinting back to him. She said Hirano was in serious trouble and needed him now, and Takashi's stomach dropped. Turns out some workers had cornered Hirano and were trying to strip him of his guns. They told him weapons like that weren't for kids to be carrying around, but Hirano shot back that he knew more about firearms than all of them combined. Right as they moved to snatch the guns by force, Takagi's parents showed up, and her father wanted to know what all the noise was about. His men filled him in that Hirano was refusing to hand over his weapons, so he turned and asked Hirano directly. Hirano told him he couldn't let go of his guns because without them, he'd go back to being the gutless nobody he used to be. He said they had given him a sense of purpose and a reason to be useful, so Takagi's father asked him to spell out what that purpose actually was. Hirano tried to get the words out, but they kept dying in his throat, so Takashi, who had just shown up, stepped in for him. He told everyone that Hirano's purpose was protecting Takagi, and when the rest of the crew rolled up, they all backed Takashi up. Takagi then looked her father dead in the eye and told him Hirano was the one who'd kept her alive when he, her own father, hadn't. While all of this was unfolding, one of Shido's followers, who had somehow slipped onto the estate, was on the phone with Shido, telling him that Takagi's parents would welcome him and the rest of them with open arms. After hanging up, Shido went straight back to preaching at his followers, and they looked even more glazed over than before. Outside the bus, some brat he tossed out for mouthing off was banging on the door and begging to get back in, but Shido left him there, and the zombies handled the rest. Later, back at Takagi's family estate, she got into it with some of the residents over what the outbreak actually was. These people refused to believe the dead were up and walking around eating folks, and insisted it was just some new illness that would eventually have a cure. Takagi told the clueless idiots to keep believing whatever they wanted, and pointed out that even the experts hadn't pinned down what triggered the outbreak. When she brought up her father, the woman she'd been arguing with accused them of trying to normalize the idea that killing people was fine. She twisted the whole thing around, claiming the elite were just hungry for pointless bloodshed, and the crowd ate it up, as people started chanting against all forms of violence. Takagi and the boys headed back inside. She was fuming so hard that she kept ranting, and even tried to go at Hirano when he said he kind of got where those people were coming from. Luckily, Takashi jumped in and shut it down, giving Hirano the floor to explain himself. His point was that people only acknowledged what they chose to see, and even when they knew the situation was dire, they'd rather lie to themselves than face it. Takagi called the crowd idiots, but eventually she got what Hirano was saying. Right then, Takashi mumbled something under his breath, catching both Takagi and Hirano off guard since they hadn't expected him to be tuned in. He got a little flustered, but they kept clowning on him, and when they said he had everything it took to lead them, he was genuinely caught off guard. Meanwhile, Takagi's father had pulled Sayako aside in his private room and presented her with a double-edged blade, saying it was his way of honoring her father, who had once been his sword instructor. Sayako hesitated to take it, feeling like she hadn't earned it, and said she'd pass it along to her father once she tracked him down. That response made the man crack up, since it was exactly what he'd expected from her. He then came clean that the sword was actually a thank you for keeping his daughter alive, so she suggested he hand it to Takashi instead, since he was the one leading their group. Takagi's father acknowledged that Takashi was a solid young man, but felt he was too tender-hearted and would second-guess himself at the worst possible moment. Around that time, Takashi had gone back to his room, and while he was mulling over why Hirano and Takagi had called him their leader, Rei walked in and interrupted his thoughts. She broke it down for him, saying everyone had started looking to him because he'd been showing leadership instincts from day one, starting with how he'd handled everything back at school. Takashi pushed back, saying he'd just been running on adrenaline, and argued that their survival had always been a team effort. As the conversation kept going, Rei casually leaned into him and started rambling about how girls only went for sweet guys who actually treated them well. Takashi pointed out that he didn't exactly fit that description, and she agreed, but then admitted the outbreak had made her finally notice all the good traits in him she'd been overlooking. Somehow, she ended up sitting on his lap, and when she looked up at him, she told him all she wanted was to be by his side. She also said she wouldn't trip if he caught feelings for someone else, and when she placed his hand on her chest, he flipped her onto the bed. Hovering over her, he admitted he had no idea whether to feel glad or irritated by her out-of-nowhere confession. He started leaning in, but she winced in pain, so he backed off and apologized. Rei told him not to stress about it, and said she'd go track down Marikawa to check on her bruises, but her parting words were for him to think about what she told him. Later, Takashi went to have a word with Takagi's father, who revealed he wanted to head out and look for his mother and Rei's dad. The man asked what his plan was once he found them, considering they were moving to the power plant in 2 days. Takashi told him he'd be back before then, but said if they didn't make it in time, he shouldn't wait up. After that, he went to pack his stuff, and Rei came by to hand him some extra supplies he might need on the road. While they were talking, Sayako appeared in her usual fit and told him flat out that she was coming along. Takashi took a few seconds to drink in the sight of her, and even Rei had to admit she looked incredible. As Sayako laid out her case for why Takashi had to take her with him, Rei suddenly bolted outside with her bayonet raised and ready, leaving her friends baffled. Turns out, she'd picked up on Shido's gross energy the moment the butler started walking him toward the house. The butler had let him through because Shido's father was a senator, and while he was out here gassing the man up, Shido's mind was screaming about how wrong he was. Growing up, he'd watched everyone worship his father, but none of them knew that behind the senator's polished smile was a vicious tyrant at home. The man spent his downtime tormenting his own family, and after his wife chose to check out of life permanently, Shido cut him off completely and even swapped his last name so he could live freely as a teacher. Then one day, out of nowhere, his father called and ordered him to tank Rei's grades because her dad was sniffing around his shady dealings. Shido had zero hesitation carrying it out, because all those years of being broken down had made him just as rotten as his old man. Back in the present, Rei stormed up to him and shoved her bayonet in his face as she called him out over her father and her grades. She said that after she failed, her dad had broken down crying and blamed himself for the whole thing. It hadn't taken her long to connect the dots and realize Shido was behind the grade sabotage, but she'd stayed quiet to protect her father's case. Now that none of that mattered anymore, she was finally cashing in her revenge. When she pressed the blade against his cheek, the shaking man asked whether she was really ready to become a killer just to clear her father's name. That only threw more fuel on Rei's fire, and as she screamed at him to shut his mouth, Takagi's father stepped out and told her to go ahead and end Shido right there. He said she had every right to do it now that the law had been completely gutted by the pandemic. Takashi moved to step in, but Seiko grabbed him back and said Rei had to make this call on her own. Nobody else moved after she said that, and as they all watched, Shido started poking at Rei, trying to get a reaction. Luckily, she kept it together and didn't take the bait, and as she turned to walk away, Takagi's father asked if she was truly okay, leaving Shido breathing. Rei confirmed she was, saying the man simply wasn't worth burning her energy on. That stung Shido way more than a blade would have, but there was nothing he could do about it. And ultimately, he and his little cult got booted out because Takagi's father refused to let their toxic mindset spread through his people. Meanwhile, on a Russian submarine, the crew received orders to fire their missiles since the Americans had already launched theirs. Up on the space station, the astronauts watching it all unfold concluded it was only going to get worse once every other nation decided to follow. Exactly as they'd expected, the Japanese Navy caught wind of the missiles and fired back, though their goal was to intercept the ones launched by other countries. They only managed to knock out 2 before zombies overran the vessel responsible for stopping the last one. The missile detonated mid-air, right near the airport where Rika was stationed, and as everyone started buzzing about what had just gone down, she ominously told them the nights ahead were about to get a whole lot grimmer. Just minutes before the strike, Marikawa excitedly announced to the group that she'd finally remembered Rika's number and begged someone to hand her a phone. Rika was thrilled to hear from her, but right as she was trying to figure out where Marikawa was calling from, her phone started smoking. That happened to be the exact moment the missile hit, leaving everyone questioning whether they'd just witnessed a second Big Bang. Takagi, being the resident genius of the crew, pieced it together fast and told Rei to check whether her gun's sensors were still responsive. The moment Rei confirmed they weren't, Takagi's expression went cold, because it locked in her fear that an electromagnetic pulse had been released alongside the explosion. At that same moment, her father's crew was scrambling to understand why every computer and machine on the property had gone completely dark. The bus Shido was operating also ran on onboard computers, so it slammed right into the bulldozer that had been setting up a blockade. With the barricade wiped out, the zombies poured straight into the protected zone. Back at the estate, Takagi was breaking everything down for her friends, but the only thing Marikawa absorbed was that she'd never be able to call Rika again. Takagi told her that losing phone access was honestly the least of their problems, and while she was still talking, her parents walked in. Her father asked whether there was any chance of getting everything back online, and she told him that swapping out the fried circuits in the vehicles and computers might do the trick. He immediately barked orders at his people to get on it, and while he was praising Takagi for being a genius, the zombies showed up at the gate. Without hesitating, he ordered the gates sealed, even knowing that most of his people were still stuck outside. Hirano dropped the one zombie that slipped through, and the men around him looked at him like he'd just leveled up. Shortly after, a servant arrived to deliver a gun to Takagi's mother, and once she had it, she tore her skirt apart so she could actually move. Takagi threw herself in front of Hirano's line of sight because he was full-on drooling over the woman, but her mother didn't seem bothered at all and offered the gun to Takagi instead. Takagi told her she had no idea how to fire one and asked why she even had it in the first place. Her mother explained she'd taken an executive self-defense course back during her Wall Street era, leaving the gang to mentally picture what she must have been like back then. The woman then asked Hirano to get Takagi up to speed on how to use the weapon, and he told her to consider it done. Right then, the zombies muscled their way through the gates, and Takashi called out for everyone to fall back. The people still in the camp had no such luck, getting picked off by the horde with zero resistance. The loud woman who'd been going head-to-head with Takagi earlier tried to hold her own, but she got completely overwhelmed and eaten. Takashi and the others held off the zombies at the house, but eventually had to pull back, knowing they were on the losing end of that fight. They gathered on one of the upper balconies with the remaining survivors and Takagi's parents, and just as they regrouped, the butler arrived with an update. He said the next area over hadn't been swallowed by the horde yet, so Takagi's father declared that was where they were heading. He called on everyone willing to take up arms to roll out with him, but Takagi pushed back hard. She argued they'd be perfectly safe barricading themselves inside the house, but her father shut it down, reminding her the zombies had already busted through the gate without breaking a sweat. He then told Takashi to stay on his mission to find his mother and Rei's father, and turned to Hirano and ordered him to guard Takagi with everything he had. When he mentioned they'd hold the line to give them time to escape, Takagi started spiraling and desperately tried to sell her father on the idea of locking down inside the house. When she started losing it, her mother stepped up and slapped her, and she went dead silent. The woman told her that even if her father's call looked selfish on the surface, it was still the best option they had, and she urged her daughter to trust that. Takagi had nothing left to say after that, so her mother shifted to Alice and told the little girl to always listen to her older siblings. She then told them to move, right as her husband ordered his men to light the zombies up like it was a fireworks show. While the fighting kicked off, Takagi and the others sprinted to the garage to grab their truck, which had somehow survived the electromagnetic pulse untouched. The mechanic told them there were still a couple of things he needed to sort out, so they promised to cover him while he finished up. Takashi, Saiko, Rei, and Hirano kept slashing through the horde, and when a group of zombies tried to get to Marikawa and Alice, Takagi jumped in and handled it. Rei also got tangled up in a nasty spot, but Takashi yanked her out of it right before things went sideways. Before long, the truck was ready. So the gang piled in and tried to convince the mechanic to come along, but he waved them off and chose to stay and keep fighting. Since nobody could talk him out of it, Marikawa hammered the gas and tore toward the front gate. They flew past Takagi's father on the way out, but he never once turned to look at the truck or his daughter. Once they cleared the estate, they kept burning down the road, and when Marikawa spotted the bus blocking their path, she pulled a straight-up Fast and Furious maneuver. Saiko nearly had her head taken off since she was halfway out of the vehicle, but Takashi hauled her back inside, just in time. As they kept moving, Rei tried to check in on Takagi, but Hirano cut her off and said she didn't need to be coddled. Everyone else thought he was being cold about it, but Takagi sided with Hirano and told him she was holding up just fine. She then shifted the conversation to the truck, pointing out that the engine didn't sound right. Takashi brushed it off and told her to keep pushing until the engine completely gave out. He promised that once they tracked down his mother and Rei's father, they'd help her find Rika too. Not long after, the truck died right in the middle of the highway, so they ditched it and pushed forward on foot, even though the whole area was absolutely swarming with zombies. Comment HOTD if you watch this recap to the end. And if you enjoy anime recaps like this, subscribe to the channel and watch this next video.